If you are dealing with chronic symptoms like anxiety, panic, or weird body sensations and symptoms that will not go away, you have probably tried to figure out what caused it all. And most people will land on an event, like the one thing that started it all. Today, I want to explain what's actually happening when a nervous system gets stuck. How does it become sensitized? And why it's not usually as simple as one thing breaking you. Before I get into it, I did want to let everyone know I released a course for nervous system sensitization specifically for that. If you want to learn more about it, the info is in the description. Let's get into the episode. I first want to talk about what is sensitization. So I want to define it in a very simple way. I want you to be able to go, I get it. That makes sense to me. Let's separate it first from dysregulation, because there's so much confusion here on the overlap and more importantly, the distinctions between the two. For dysregulation, we're looking at your nervous system gets activated, and then in time, possibly an extended amount of time, it comes back down. There are periods where you're going to get stuck for a bit of an extended time being hyper-aroused and dealing with, anxiety and, that kind of energy, or hypo-aroused, where you deal with maybe those feelings of depression, symptoms of that too much of a downshift there. Versus sensitization, which is the dysregulation getting locked on. With sensitization, we have to talk about the baseline that you are at, because the baseline that you have is the level your system rests at while nothing is happening, okay? With sensitization, that baseline over time has moved up and up and up and up and up. So we're just sitting at such an elevated baseline before any activation is there. It's not about you reacting to bigger, more impactful things. It's actually your reaction is starting higher. It has a higher starting point. And that is why everything feels like too much and too intense, because you're starting from a place that the baseline is you're already activated. So any further activation pushes you to a limit that is much, much higher than your standard dysregulation of like, oh, this thing happened, I got an email, or someone almost hit me on the freeway and I get a little bit dysregulated. I'm in that panic state. And then in time, we come back to baseline. Sensitization is I'm already activated. Someone almost hits me on the freeway and I loop into this big thing. I feel like I'm going to black out. It's very, very extreme because that baseline is already sitting so much higher. I do see this as a spectrum, which is why it can be kind of hard to make things black and white, although I'm going to do my best just for understanding's sake. I don't see dysregulation and sensitization as two completely different buckets. Like this is this and this is this over here. It's more like a spectrum of where you fall in between the two, because on one end we have that healthy nervous system. It gets activated and then it comes back down easily. And then you have the dysregulation, the middle. It's a system that's running like a little bit hot and the baseline is elevated, but you're functioning. So it goes up, we get dysregulated, we kind of struggle to come back down, but we do come back down. And then we have the far end, which is sensitization. That is fully locked on, 24/7 symptoms. The system isn't coming back down on its own. So you're going to be somewhere on that spectrum. And most people do not just jump straight to the far end of severe sensitization. They slide along that spectrum over time without realizing that they're inching and inching and inching closer to the sensitization side. This is something that does not happen all at once. It happens over time. Sensitization does not happen overnight, although I know sometimes it feels like it did. There are many stories of people that said it changed in the blink of an eye. I went from being this person to someone who couldn't do XYZ. Sensitization is a slow buildup. It happens after years of low-grade or even high-grade stress that becomes your normal. Like that stress, living in a state of chronic stress, chronic anxiety, slowly over time raises that baseline, which shifts you down that spectrum closer to sensitization. So when you stay in an anxious state without realizing it for a long period of time, or maybe you do realize it, but nothing is happening to get you back, that sends you further down that spectrum down into the sensitization. Another thing is pushing through exhaustion. So we're tired, but we are not resting. Being the responsible one or the strong one, having a lot of responsibilities and obligations and duties put on top of you. I have talked to so many women over the years that have just done that for such an extended period of time and then never fully recovering before the next stressful thing hits. So it's like we keep taking hits, the baseline keeps rising, and there's no chance to downshift or rest or fully recover from the stressful thing. And over time, what you will see is that the baseline just kept creeping up. One of the biggest issues that I see is that the stuff that raises our baseline is celebrated. Unfortunately, it's celebrated, it's modeled, it's expected, it's normal. It's very normalized. And that's what makes this very tricky. Being productive, staying busy, pushing through, sacrificing yourself, abandoning yourself for other people, not complaining, no resting unless you've earned it. What did you do today that allows you to lay down right now or that allows you to not say yes to that activity or whatever? Like that's a huge one for people. Putting everyone else's needs first feels very noble, feels very selfless. It's kind of like a ticking time bomb when that becomes a chronic behavior that you have. Ignoring your body's signals because you have stuff to do, that's that pushing through energy and just blasting past your capacity levels because you don't have time to listen to your body. Our bodies are so smart. They have been giving us signs and signals for years before we totally crash out. And we're just like, oh, it's not, unfortunately, it's like the sign isn't big enough. The signal isn't big enough until it has to do something that puts our life at a screeching halt. You don't realize over time that you're running yourself into the ground because when we look around, everyone else is doing the same thing. It's completely normal. Or people are telling you you're doing so great. Wow. How do you do it all? You really do it all. And it's like, yeah, doing it all is crashing us all to the ground. So I think there is a sneaky little middle ground here that people stay in for a while until they're not in this place anymore. But I think a lot of people are sensitized and they don't know it. This was an experience I had. My baseline was way higher than what a standard, normal, healthy, regulated person would be. But because I felt that way for so long, it was normal to me. Like this is what I knew. It felt like me. So I would find things that would help temporarily. I would feel fine for me and I would keep going. But fine did not mean that my baseline was actually healthy. It just meant that I was functioning. And that's the problem. You can function and overfunction in this way for a very long time before you have this overnight change and crash. Our body, I really do think our body goes as long as it can before it can't anymore. You don't realize you're living a lot closer to that edge than you realize. I don't think people realize how close they are to getting pushed to the point where the body starts shutting down and going haywire and throwing up all of these alarms that nobody can make any sense of. You don't want to be in that place where you're constantly teetering because let's say your baseline is pretty high and there's this level that you get to where it becomes, what's the word I want to use for this? It becomes unbearable to you or unacceptable to you. And that's the point where you're like, oh, I need to do something about this. So you do something that brings it just low enough to get you back to your normal, to your I feel fine, not realizing that your normal and your feel fine is way higher than it should be at its baseline, the place where it stays. So that becomes a problem because then something can knock you down and you can be facing full-blown chronic symptoms. I lived like that for probably 20 years without understanding what was happening. I definitely was sensitized, but not severely sensitized. That's what happened for me 2 years ago. I was definitely sensitized because I dealt with chronic symptoms, but they weren't extreme enough to totally lay me out, but they were extreme enough that I was constantly trying to fix it. I did everything you could possibly do for anxiety over 20 years. That was the main symptom that I was chasing to fix. But there comes a tipping point for most of us, for many of us, probably you if you're watching this right now, because something will come along that will push you into a whole nother category, or even from sensitization to severe sensitization. This is the way that I see it in my head and the way that it makes sense for explanation. You go from functioning, but teetering. So you're functioning, but you're like, oh, I'm kind of on the edge here, to fully locked on. We're talking 24/7. Symptoms are chronic. It is not occasional anymore. It is constant. So for me, it was my grandma dying and dental work. happening right around the same time, literally at the same time. My grandma was dying as my face was still numb from a dental procedure. That was the perfect storm that pushed my system past the point that it could no longer recover from. There was no going from that back down to my normal and I feel fine. It pushed me to a level where everything was chronic. It was chronic terror, chronic panic, chronic OCD, chronic pain, chronic nerve sensations. These were not related to any type of medication. None of that was going on at that point. It was just the tip over from your mild sensitization of some chronic symptoms that you can live with and function with to symptoms that were now had all of my attention, were chronic. I didn't get a break from them. This wasn't the cause of what I was dealing with. It wasn't my grandma dying and it wasn't the dental work. That was the thing that tipped the scale. This is what tipped it into severe sensitization for me. And I'm telling you this because it really matters. When you understand how sensitization works, it changes how you approach healing and recovery and getting rid of it, for a lack of a better phrase to explain that. You cannot blame one event. I have seen that happen very often. I see it from people who comment, from people who message me. They will say, I had a panic attack, and ever since then, I've been experiencing terror, OCD, DPDR, whatever, chronic pain, chronic symptoms, or my husband went into the hospital and ever since then, my life has never been the same, or I got divorced, or I got a virus, or I got a vaccine. It doesn't matter. There's just some type of event that pushes it over. And then we go, oh my gosh, it must have been the event. And it's like, no, the event was the tipping point for the chronic dysregulation and possibly some mild sensitization going on. It's important that we stop blaming one specific thing. It's also important that we stop chasing solving the symptoms that are only a manifestation of the problem. All of the symptoms you're experiencing, this is assuming that you've been checked out by a medical provider, right? You've done your due diligence, you've gotten the test, you've had someone check you out, and they either can't find anything or they cannot help you. It's very important that we don't get sucked into rabbit holes trying to solve each individual symptom and diagnosis that we've been given. It is a poor use of our time, because for me, it would be like, okay, well, how do I deal with the internal tremors? And then what do I do about the facial pain? And then what do I do about the neuropathy in my feet? And what do I do about the tension headache? And then all of a sudden I'm trying to solve symptoms when it's like every one of those symptoms is an indicator of one thing: the nervous system being sensitized. It's one problem. You may see lots of like branches on this tree, but when we get to the root is sensitization. That is what is driving all this. So please be careful not to go chasing or seeking chronic reassurance from people, commenting on everyone's YouTube videos, asking people questions, sending these repeated DMs. Those are all part of sensitization, but they're coming from a place of wanting information about something very specific. And that always tells me that you've lost the plot. Like you've lost where your attention and your direction should be focused on, which is the root, which is the sensitization, which is the changed response, the reduction of fear. That's where we need to be focusing on. Anytime someone asks me, did you ever have this specific symptom? I'm like, oh, we're distracted. we're looking in the wrong place. You're looking over here and I'm saying, no, we need to look over here. And you're like, but I'm really caught up in this specific symptom for this specific reason. I get it. I know it's scary, and still it's not where we're supposed to be looking. If anything, it's almost like that's the distraction from you actually getting to the root of this. We want to spend as little focus on that as possible. We want to change our interaction with it, our reaction with it, and our relationship to it. That's what matters the most. Okay. Tangent. I need you to see this as a system that just got overloaded over time and then it got stuck. That's what sensitization is. The baseline raised and the system got stuck. First gradually, a little bit at a time, and then suddenly overnight. That's how it looks for so many people. Everyone you ask, when these things become chronic and stuck, you ask them what happened around, right before, or right when all of this started, and they've got a story for you. They've all got a story for you. And that story does matter in the sense of relating that this is mind body. This was created by my brain and created by my nervous system. Okay. The goal here is, like I said, changing that response and reducing that fear and rewiring these connections that we have that are now associating everything with danger. That is a false alarm. It is not accurately perceiving reality anymore. And that's what the work of desensitization does. It helps us start perceiving reality as the truth, not the way that we're interpreting it based on our threat system in our brain being absolutely on fire at all times. So the goal is to bring that baseline back down to where it should be. And that is the difference between managing this and actually healing it. You don't want to manage it. You do not, and you do not need this to be a full-time job for the rest of your life. That you can recover from these symptoms as long as you're dealing with the proper cause of them instead of the hyper focus on the way that it's showing up for you, because we all think we're all very unique in that way. So if this is making things click for you, like I said, I do have that course available. It goes deeper into what's happening, why your system gets stuck, and how to start bringing that baseline down. So I would love to know what resonated with you from this episode, and I will see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.